The job posting said, minimal interaction, mostly observation. That's what sold me on it. I'd been doing gig work for months, delivery driving, warehouse temp shifts, and the idea of sitting still in a quiet building sounded perfect. The Natural History Museum ran late hours on Thursdays for some donor program, and they needed security coverage from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Easy money. The museum sits on the edge of the University District, one of those old stone buildings with high ceilings and marble floors. During the day, it's full of school groups and tourists, but at night, it's just me, one other guard named Paul, who works the upper floors, and whatever cleaning crew comes through around 2 a.m. Paul's been there for years. He showed me the rounds on my first night, check the exits, walk the main galleries, I log anything unusual in the binder at the front desk. He said the hardest part was staying awake. I brought a thermos of coffee and my phone charger. The main floor has 4 big exhibit halls: mammals, ocean life, geology, and human evolution. My route took about 20 minutes if I walked slowly. The rest of the time I sat at the desk near the main entrance, half watching the security monitors and scrolling through my phone. The building made noises, old heating pipes, the hum of climate control for the specimens. You get used to it. It was my 3rd week when I first noticed him. I was doing my 11:30 round, walking through the mammal hall. It's the biggest gallery full of taxidermy displays behind glass. Bison, wolves, a grizzly bear standing on its hind legs. The lighting is dim at night, just enough to see the pathways. And I had my flashlight but didn't really need it. There was a man standing in front of the wolf exhibit. I almost walked past him. We got stragglers sometimes, people who hid in the bathrooms before closing, trying to stay after hours. Usually they were kids, drunk, college students, that kind of thing. But this guy was just standing there, hands at his sides, facing the glass. He wore a dark jacket and jeans. I couldn't see his face. "Hey," I called out. "Museum's closed. You need to leave." He didn't move. I walked closer, my gut already telling me something was off. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to exit the building." Still nothing. I got within maybe 10 feet of him and stopped. He was completely motionless, not shifting his weight, not breathing hard, nothing. Just staring at the wolves. Sir?" Then he turned his head, not his body, just his head, and looked at me. His face was pale, expressionless. He didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long moment, then turned back to the exhibit. I should have called Paul right then. I should have radioed for backup or called the police, but I didn't. I told myself he was probably just some weirdo, maybe mentally ill, maybe homeless and looking for a warm place to stand. I didn't want to escalate things on my 3rd week. I didn't want to look like I couldn't handle a single guy standing in a museum. "I'm serious," I said, trying to sound firm. "You need to leave now or I'm calling the police." He didn't respond, didn't even blink. I backed away, keeping my eyes on him, and radioed Paul. "Hey, I've got someone on the main floor who won't leave. Can you come down?" Static. It's then Paul's voice. "Give me 2 minutes." I waited near the entrance to the mammal hall, watching the guy. He didn't move the entire time. When Paul arrived, I pointed him out. Paul walked over, said something I couldn't hear, then came back shaking his head. "He's gone," Paul said. "What?" "There's no one there." I walked back with him. The spot in front of the wolf exhibit was empty. I checked behind the displays, the side corridors, even the bathrooms. Nothing. Paul said he probably slipped out when I wasn't looking, but I'd been watching the whole time. The main exit was locked from the inside. I would have heard the alarm. Paul told me not to worry about it and went back upstairs. I finished my round, logged it in the binder, and sat back down at the desk. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was being paranoid. And the next Thursday he was back. Same spot, same dark jacket, same posture, hands at his sides, facing the glass. I saw him on my midnight round and froze. My gut was screaming at me to leave, to radio Paul, to do something, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at him from across the hall. He didn't turn around this time. Didn't acknowledge me at all. I watched him for maybe 5 minutes, and he didn't move. Not once. I could see his reflection in the glass. His face was blank, eyes open, staring. I backed out of the hall and called Paul. He came down again, and again the guy was gone by the time we both got there. Paul was getting annoyed. He said if I saw someone again, I should approach them immediately, not wait. He said I was probably seeing shadows or letting the quiet get to me, but I knew what I'd seen. The third week, but I almost didn't go in. I thought about quitting, making up an excuse, just walking away from the job, but I needed the money. And I didn't want to explain to anyone why I was scared of a guy standing in a museum. It sounded ridiculous even in my own head. I did my rounds as usual, 11:30, midnight, 1 a.m. He wasn't there. I started to relax a little. Told myself maybe it was over, maybe he'd moved on. Then at 3 a.m., I saw him on the monitor. He was standing in the Human Evolution exhibit. Same posture, same stillness. The camera angle showed him from behind. Facing a display of early hominid skulls, I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I didn't want to go down there. Every instinct told me to stay at the desk, to wait it out, to let him stand there until morning, but I couldn't just sit there. And I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the exhibit hall. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the radio. When I got to the doorway, I stopped. He was there. Exactly where the camera showed him. I could hear my own breathing, loud in the silence. "Who are you?" I said. My voice cracked. He turned around. His face was the same. Pale, blank, emotionless. But this time, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Just his mouth moving, lips pulling back slightly. His eyes didn't change. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at the desk. I called Paul, told him I was leaving, told him I couldn't do this anymore. He came down, checked the hall, found nothing. He said I looked pale, asked if I was feeling okay. I lied and said I was fine, just tired. I quit the next day. Sent an email, didn't give notice, didn't ask for my last paycheck. But Paul texted me a few times asking what happened, but I didn't reply. I still don't know who he was. I've thought about it a lot. Maybe he was a squatter who'd found a way into the building. Maybe he was messing with me on purpose. Maybe I was losing it from the isolation and the quiet. But I can't shake the memory of that smile. The way he just stood there, night after night, staring at the same exhibits. I drive past the museum sometimes, and I always look at the windows. Part of me wonders if he's still in there, standing in the dark, waiting for someone else to notice him. The museum closes to the public at 6, but the security staff stays until midnight. I'd been doing the evening shift for about 3 weeks when they asked if I wanted to try overnights. The pay bump was decent, and honestly, I liked the idea of having the place to myself. Fewer people to deal with, just walking the floors every hour, checking doors, making sure the climate control systems were running properly. The building itself is old, converted from a textile mill in the 1920s. 3 floors, mostly contemporary art on the upper levels. Sculpture garden out back that we don't patrol after dark. The ground floor is administrative offices and the main gallery, which is where most of the expensive pieces are kept. My supervisor, Rita, walked me through the routine on my first overnight. Check each room, flip the lights on as you go. Note anything unusual in the log, flip them off when you leave. The motion sensors are disabled at night because they'd go off constantly with us walking around. Instead, we rely on door sensors and the cameras. Rita showed me the security office, a cramped room near the loading dock with 6 monitors cycling through different camera feeds. She said, most nights nothing happens. Sometimes you get a mouse, sometimes a pipe makes a weird noise. Once in a while, a sensor glitches. That's it. The first week was exactly like that. I'd make my rounds, spend the time between walks, reading or watching videos on my phone. The building settled and creaked, but it was predictable. I got used to the hum of the HVAC, the way the emergency exit signs cast this greenish glow in the stairwells. It was quiet in a way I liked. The second week, I started noticing small things. I'd walk through the contemporary wing on the second floor, flip on the lights in each gallery as I passed through, and by the time I circled back an hour later, 1 or 2 of the rooms would be dark again. At first, I thought I'd just forgotten to turn them on. It was easy to lose track when you're half asleep at 2 a.m., but then I started paying closer attention, mentally noting which switches I'd flipped, and it kept happening. I checked the log to see if anyone else had mentioned it. Nothing. I asked Rita about it when she came in for the evening shift, and she said the wiring in the building was old, that sometimes breakers tripped for no reason. She told me to just note it in the log if it kept happening. So I did. But my gut was telling me something was off. It wasn't just the lights. And I started noticing that the cameras in the security office would sometimes lose feed for a few seconds, just long enough that I'd miss a room entirely on the cycle. And once I could have sworn I heard footsteps on the floor above me while I was in the main gallery, but when I went upstairs, there was nothing. Every door was locked. Every room was empty. I told myself I was being paranoid. Old building, weird acoustics, tired brain making connections that weren't there. I even laughed about it with my roommate when I got home one morning. He said I was spending too much time alone and that I should listen to podcasts or something to keep my mind busy. But then, about 3 weeks in, I was doing my 3 a.m. round. I walked through the second floor contemporary wing, turned on the lights in each of the 4 galleries like always, and continued down to the sculpture hall at the end. I spent maybe 5 minutes in there checking the windows, making sure the humidity gauge was reading normal. When I walked back toward the stairwell, the first gallery I'd passed through was dark. I stopped in the doorway. I know I'd turned that light on. I know it. I flipped the switch again, and the overhead fluorescence buzzed to life. The room looked the same as it always did. White walls, 3 large canvases, a bench in the center. Nothing out of place. I stood there for a minute, just listening. The building was silent except for the hum of the lights. I should have called the police then. I had my phone in my pocket. But what was I going to say? Someone turned off a light? I'd sound insane. So I finished my round and went back to the security office. And I pulled up the camera feed for that gallery, rewound it to the time I'd been in the sculpture hall. The feed was grainy, black and white. But I could see the room clearly. For about 3 minutes, nothing. Just an empty gallery, lights on. Then the feed cut out for maybe 8 seconds. When it came back, the lights were off. I sat there staring at the monitor, my heart pounding in my chest. I rewound it again. Same thing. Feed cuts, lights go off. No one visible in the frame. No explanation. I thought about calling Rita, but it was 3:30 in the morning and I didn't want to wake her up over what might still be an electrical issue. Every instinct told me to leave, to just walk out and deal with it in the morning, but I had 4 more hours on my shift, and I didn't want to lose the job. So I stayed. I made my 4 a.m. round, and this time I left all the lights on, every single one. I walked through each room, flipped every switch, and then went back to the security office and watched the monitors. For about 20 minutes, everything stayed lit. Then one by one, the galleries on the second floor started going dark. Not all at once, just one every few minutes, like someone was walking through and turning them off. I couldn't see anyone on the cameras. The feeds didn't cut out this time. The lights just went off, one room after another. And I sat there watching it happen, my hands shaking. I grabbed my flashlight and went back upstairs. I checked every room, every closet, every corner. I checked the breaker panel in the utility hallway. Everything was fine. Everything was empty, but I had this sinking feeling, this weight in my chest that wouldn't go away. Yet I kept expecting to turn a corner and see someone standing there, but I never did. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., I was exhausted and wired at the same time. I wrote everything in the log, lights going off, camera feeds cutting out, the timeline of it all. I left it for Rita to see. When I came in that night, she pulled me aside. She said maintenance had checked the wiring and the breakers and everything was fine. She said the camera system was old and glitchy, that it happened sometimes. She didn't say I was imagining things, but I could tell she thought I was overreacting. I worked 2 more nights after that and nothing happened. The lights stayed on, the feeds stayed stable. It was quiet and boring, just like it was supposed to be. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. Moving through the building while I was walking my rounds, staying just out of sight, turning off lights behind me, like they were playing some kind of game. I still think about it. I never got answers. I ended up quitting a week later. Told them I'd found something closer to home, but the truth is, I couldn't stand being in that building anymore. Couldn't stand the idea that someone might have been there the whole time, watching me on those cameras, waiting for me to notice. To this day, I don't know what was happening in that museum, but my gut tells me it wasn't the wiring. The planetarium doors are supposed to stay locked after the last show. That's written in the security manual, page 14. I know because I checked it 3 times that first week. I'd been working nights at the Science Museum for about a month when this happened. Before that, I was doing warehouse inventory, 3rd shift, same kind of hours, but at least there I knew what belonged where. Museums are different. Everything's supposed to be exactly where it was the day before, and you notice when it's not. The building's old. Built in the 60s, renovated twice, but they kept the original planetarium dome. It's in the west wing, past the geology hall and the marine life dioramas. The dome itself is maybe 40 feet across, with those reclining seats arranged in circles facing up. During the day, they run shows every 2 hours. At night, it's just dark and locked. My route takes about 90 minutes, if I'm thorough. I start at the loading dock, work through the ground floor exhibits, then up to the 2nd floor where the planetarium is. After that, it's the admin wing, back down to the gift shop, then I start over. 3 full rounds per shift, plus hourly checks on the alarm panel. The first time I noticed something off was a Tuesday, maybe 3 weeks into the job. I'd locked the planetarium doors at the start of my shift, both the main entrance and the side door that leads to the projection booth. When I came back through on my second round, around 1:30 in the morning, the projector in the center of the room was angled differently. Not by much. Maybe 15 degrees to the left. But I'd walked past it 2 hours earlier, and I remembered thinking it looked like a giant metal insect, the way the lens assembly stuck out. Now it was pointing toward the southeast section of seats instead of due south. I told myself maintenance had been in. Maybe they'd adjusted something remotely. The museum has a whole system for that. Automated climate control, lighting schedules, all of it networked. I checked the access log at the security desk. No entries for the planetarium. Since the last show ended at 7 p.m., I repositioned the projector, locked the doors again, kept walking. The next night, Wednesday, it happened again. This time it was the projector and 3 of the seat sections. Someone had folded them all the way back like they'd been lying there staring straight up at the dome. I hadn't touched those seats. I know I hadn't. They're heavy. Industrial recliners with thick metal frames. You have to pull a lever and push hard to get them to move. I stood there for a while, just looking at them. The dome overhead was completely dark. No emergency lights inside the planetarium itself. Just the faint glow from the exit signs near the doors. I had this sinking feeling in my chest. The kind you get when you know something's wrong, but you can't articulate why. I almost called my supervisor. I had my phone out, his number pulled up. But what was I going to say? Someone's moving furniture? It sounded stupid. I put the phone away, reset the seats, checked both doors, locked, no signs of tampering. I even checked the projection booth. Empty. The equipment up there was covered in dust. Thursday I brought a flashlight with a stronger beam. At the museum issue ones are garbage, barely better than a phone light. I wanted something that could fill the whole dome if I needed it to. I got to the planetarium around midnight, unlocked the main door, stepped inside. Everything looked normal. Projector in position, seats upright. I walked the perimeter, checked the booth again, locked up. When I came back at 2 a.m., the projector was rotated a full 90 degrees. It was pointing directly at the door I'd just come through. That's when I started to feel like someone was watching me. Not in the planetarium. I would have seen them, heard them, but somewhere in the building. Someone who knew my route, knew my timing. Every instinct told me to leave, to walk straight out to my car and call someone. But I didn't. I stayed. I moved the projector back. Yes, this time I took a photo of it with my phone, showing the angle and the timestamp. If it moved again, I'd have proof. Friday night I got there early, clocked in at 10 instead of 11. I wanted to throw off the timing, see if that changed anything. I went straight to the planetarium, unlocked it, turned on every light I could find. The overheads, the floor strips, even the emergency exit lights have a manual override. I sat in one of the seats for 20 minutes, just watching. Nothing moved. No sounds except the HVAC and the building settling. I locked up and continued my route. When I came back through just after midnight, all the lights were off. I know I'd left them on. I know. The projector was in the center of the room, rotated to face the northeast section. And in that section, one seat was reclined all the way back, But I didn't go near it. I stood in the doorway with my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the dome, the seats, the walls. I couldn't see anyone. But my gut was screaming at me that I wasn't alone. The air felt different, heavier, like the pressure had changed. I backed out, locked the door. I didn't reset anything. I just left it. I called the supervisor from the security desk. It was 12:30 in the morning, and I didn't care. I told him someone was getting into the planetarium, that I documented it, that I needed someone else to come in and verify. He sounded annoyed. He said he'd check the logs in the morning and we'd talk about it. I didn't go back to the planetarium for the rest of the shift. I stayed at the desk watching the camera feeds. We've got cameras covering the hallways, the main entrances, the loading dock, and nothing pointed directly at the planetarium doors. But I could see the corridor outside. No one went in, no one came out. Saturday I called in sick. Sunday too. Monday I went back, day shift this time. I told them I needed to switch. They asked why. I said personal reasons. They moved me to weekends, 4 p.m. to midnight, which means I'm gone before the building empties out completely. I went back to the planetarium once during the day, a week later. I wanted to see it with people around, with the lights on and the doors propped open for a school group. It looked normal. The projector was in position. The seats were upright. But when I stood in the center of the room under the dome, I had the same feeling I'd had that last night. Like someone was lying in one of those seats, staring up, waiting for the lights to go out. And I never found out who it was. Building management checked the locks, reviewed the footage, found nothing. They said maybe the projector's mount was loose, that the seats might have had a mechanical issue. I didn't argue. I still work there. Different shift, different wing. I don't go near the planetarium anymore. Sometimes I see the night guy, new hire, started a month after I switched, and I want to ask him if he's noticed anything. But I don't. I figure if something's happening, he'll either say something or he won't. I just know I'm not going back in there after dark. Some rooms don't want you there. You can feel it. And whatever was in that planetarium, reclining in the seats, moving the projector, turning off the lights, it wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to make me stay. It was trying to make